My name is Luke Clancy, as you may know. I'm a radio storyteller and producer. I make long-form and short-form documentaries and drama, all in the audio realm. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that today. What I was trying to do was use the kind of minimal possible tools rather than, as in all audio-visual realms, you could go up to some extreme of quality, but I was interested to see if we could, just use the most basic tools, which is your iPhone or your other phone. But actually, it seems that is really complicated. What I want to do is to look a little bit about at audio storytelling, and look a bit about how we might use just the basic recording from a telephone, from an iPhone, put that together to assemble a story. So what we'll do in the first part of today is kind of talk a little bit about how you might tell stories with audio, how you might assemble different units of sound and move stories along. I want to show you a couple of examples of us doing that. And then we'll talk a little bit specifically about you using your own little devices, and hopefully maybe I'll come around and just see that everybody can. When we're finished after today's session, hopefully you'll feel like recording some pieces. So over the gap between this first workshop and the second workshop, hopefully people will go out and have an idea of a thing that you might like to practice those new skills on. So between this workshop, when we talk about what you might like to record, and then the next workshop where we bring it all together in Reaper. And I guess at this, most people have used some kind of non-linear editing thing. Most people probably have put together a video of some sort. Will I be right there? Yeah, and you've seen a timeline, and you've seen different events on different tracks of a timeline. So there isn't anything strange about it. It should be easier than editing video, because there are less kind of components to be looking at. But there are also some very interesting, for me, specific things about telling stories with audio that I think, I'm hoping to point you to, so that when you do go out with your camera phone, you'll be able to think about those qualities, because it is quite a different way of telling a story than using a picture. I think that when Vivian had this workshop first announced, it said recording great audio, and it actually has since then been downgraded. I had nothing to do with downgraded to recording good audio, and I think that's what we're talking about. Quite good enough audio where it's not about the pristine quality of it, but that the power of the storytelling can come through, and you're just using a tool to tell a story like you would use a pen to tell a story. And so I think that's what the iPhone could possibly, or what your own phone as a recording device could possibly offer to you. What I wanted to do was play you there's just two little bits of audio I wanted to listen to, which tell stories in slightly different ways. One of them is narrative fiction, and one of them is documentary. From an American podcast called The Organist. I don't know if anybody's come across that. It's sort of related to that sort of literary endeavor called McSweeney's. I don't know if you've ever come across McSweeney's. So this is kind of an offshoot podcast that is a little bit related to that and The Believer magazine. And this is a guy called Edgar Oliver. And it's a tiny little drama. I won't play the whole thing for you, but in total it's about 7 minutes in length. But I think it's just interesting how it's put together in a very simple way. The sound effects, the cues are kind of they're very straightforward. We've heard them all before, but they're just kind of combined in quite an imaginative way.
The day begins with breakfast. I do enjoy scrambled eggs. I mash an avocado and mix it with the eggs, and when I fry them up, the eggs are green. There is no ham involved. It has nothing to do with the children's book. However, I do enjoy a little bacon. It sounds as if Rex is up too. Rex lives next door with his people, Mr. and Mrs. McCrae. I don't know what time Rex wakes up. Sometimes I think he must never sleep. He's always out there in the McCrae's backyard, romping and frolicking as dogs do. From wherever I am in the house, upstairs or downstairs, I can hear him. Sometimes, when I'm not even in the house, when I'm down the street or in another town, sometimes it almost seems as if I can hear him, even then. Oh. What's that, Rex? A good morning to you, too. Yes, you can smell that, can't you? You want me to do what? I can't do that, Rex. You say the most outrageous things. Oh, now you're just trying to get a rise out of me. One moment, please. I have to turn the bacon a little bit. There we are. I do enjoy the smell of bacon in the morning, bacon and eggs. Breakfast sets the tone for the day, doesn't it, Rex? A tone of optimism and conquest, isn't it? Yes. And what do I have to do today? Pick up groceries, return library books? What? I can't do that, Rex. And in any case, why would I? They've been nothing but friendly to me, and the very picture of good neighbors. And even if they weren't, well, I could go to jail. But I don't even own a gun. Well, yes, there are other ways. Well, yes, I suppose that is possible. Although I dare say I'm not sure I would be qualified. As you know, I did drop out of medical school. Oh, now I know you're being facetious. You take a joke too far and it simply becomes grand guignol. Good morning, Mr. McCrae. Yes, I'm aware that Rex got out of your yard the other day. And yes, he did do that. No need to apologize. I never liked that cat anyway. Oh, I see. Yes, I imagine the running away and roaming about must be very annoying. But isn't that an extreme solution? Must you really have it done this afternoon? What if one day Rex wants to sire puppies? No. I see. The appointment is made. Good day to you too, Mr. McCrae. Ah, Rex. Now I understand why you're in such a state this morning. You poor fellow. As the Bible says, some are born as eunuchs.
I think it's very interesting because the things that I'm interested in audio are quite prominent in that it makes a lot of play of the interiority of the monologue of what's going on, and plays that off against reality and the space it's in. So, you know, we don't quite know whether he is hearing this as the dog conversing with him. We don't know if we're supposed to regard him as psychotic or if this is a complete fantasy. And it really plays around with the edge, and also because the content is quite macabre. I think it uses that the sort of really intense interiority of somebody talking in what might be just in their head in a really interesting kind of way. I mean, maybe, how did you react to that?
I'll hear the end.
Well, when we get back to that at the end, it's paused. And so that's a kind of storytelling that's definitely fictional. But what I really like is that it's, I've done some work in binaural recording, which is kind of like right up at the other end of things, where you're trying to place everything in a room, in a space, and give people a sense. And that's a possibility, but it's not actually necessarily the most powerful kind of storytelling. And sometimes the storytelling is like a really cliched ring on a doorbell, really cliched footsteps, but that somehow bring you into a little interior monologue in a way that would be very hard to do on film. It's very hard to tell that story without falling into, we know that he's one thing or the other, or we know absolutely his mental state, we know whether even the dog is there. And it sort of plays into that whole thing that actually, that clearly is just a collection of sound effects. It's not a world, but then it's completely immersive in a way because it has a lot of gaps in it that lets you kind of wander into it and fill out the sensation of it. So I think that's it's narrative, it's fictional, but it has a story arc, and it has a jeopardy. Will the dog get neutered or not? So it has this kind of, like, in a quite compact way, has a sense of old-fashioned storytelling in a kind of fictional way. And I wanted to play you another piece of my own, which is more of a kind of a documentary bent. But all the same, the ideas that I want to talk to you about recording are in it, in the sense that this time you're not going to use the arc of the story to get you from minute 1 to minute 7. So it's more of an accretion process, a fact, a moment that you were happy in, and like a moment where you were having pleasure that will get you to another moment, rather than there's an arc and I'm following the jeopardy or following the arc. So this is just. It may relate to the 3D filmmaking that we're going to get later in the week. This is my first trying out of an Oculus Rift, which is the device that Microsoft, like a headset that Facebook recently bought. But it's quite interesting. I mean, you all know the Oculus Rift. It's quite interesting because there's a lot of user-generated content on it, and in fact you don't need a huge stereoscopic camera. It can be made from 2 GoPro cameras kind of welded together, and there's a lot of user-generated content despite it being kind of stereoscopic vision. But anyway, so this is just a kind of storytelling that's much more documentary, but with the same idea of just
virtual reality is
get you through keep you with it for 7 minutes.
For several decades now. But with Facebook's recent acquisition of the Oculus VR system, the area has received a powerful new push. This time the twist is that the technology leans towards the users, with hundreds of amateur movies shot with the cheap, indestructible GoPro camera already available for free download, although the headsets themselves, basically big pairs of black goggles with mini video screens instead of lenses, are still not quite everyday items. But just you wait. Artists Jessie Jones and Caroline Campbell are currently researching with an Oculus VR headset, so I went to visit them at their base in the Irish Museum of Modern Art, where I donned the Oculus as the artist showed me around a selection of virtual netherworlds.
I'm Caroline Campbell. I'm an artist and filmmaker. I'm just loading up a stereoscopic video on YouTube that someone's recorded, and what they've done is they've mounted 2 GoPros on a drone, just at equal distance from each other, and they've just flown around and created a stereoscopic image which is patched together and put up on YouTube. You can see the stereoscopic image on the screen.
Got a picture of a garden and some trees in it.
Yeah, we're just down the ground now because the drone is down the ground. So I'm going to put this. You can put the Oculus on your head.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Am I in there now? Yeah, okay.
So you might lose your balance, just to be aware of that.
Okay.
So
I'll try not to lose my
if
balance.
you want to know where the table is,
That's
okay, just in case.
I put my hand down and the table is exactly where I would expect it.
I'm Jessie Jones, I'm an artist. I guess we were doing a lot of research earlier in the year around Taylorism and the body and labour and stuff like that, and just thinking about how this other type of kind of labour is beginning to happen, which is like ocular labour. and retinal labour or something in terms of your focusing and the movement of your eye, like what's happening there that's making you so tired?
There's a very kind of strange sensation when you're very low, as though your body had sunk beneath the road and your head was just
Quite dreamlike, isn't it?
Yeah, the perspectives are quite unusual, and when you try to kind of feel where your body might be in relation to your eyes, then the world begins to sort of split apart in strange ways. Moving through the world on an ordinary day, you are doing some retinal labour. I wonder why it becomes more intense.
Because it's not as dispersed through your body, because you're only relying on this particular like zone of your two eyes bringing together this stereoscopic image. You're not dispersing that attentiveness around your body. It's kind of the rest of your body is just may as well not even be there. Like it's not useful. Your kind of sense of like how you're perceiving the environment is just so discombobulating that it's kind of making your stomach turn a little bit. It's like going up in a like big wheel or a roller coaster or something.
If I tap my foot, I can still hear it, even though I'm looking down. Nothing down there. It makes a noise. The carpet is very interesting. This does sound like some students in their bed sitting down, but wow, that carpet is really interesting.
It's so detailed.
Yeah.
And maybe also, is it true that Persian carpets were really meant to be built as a way of representing kind of like the world and ideas? Like the history of the Persian carpet is kind of like similar to like the writing of a computer game. I remember my friend painstakingly redrew a Persian carpet as an art project one time, and I had to listen to Persian carpet stories for about 3 months because you drew it with one pencil and it was like AO size.
One of the things that you can't help noticing with the GoPro and with the Oculus is that in a way, one way or the other, you're going to end up moving on these technological tracks that are laid down by huge corporate entities. And I wonder how you feel or how you respond to that.
I think it's super problematic. I mean, like I had been working quite a while in film, making 16mm film, and it felt like 16 was a medium that I could trust because it wasn't embroiled in that kind of process of like commercial cinema. It had a kind of its own space. It had a bit of like material autonomy. Hold it into the center of your vision. See, it's like this white kind of ghosty thing. Hold that in the center of your vision and see if you can get over it.
This involves craning round over my shoulder.
Yeah.
Which is, that makes it one feel my body quite strange as well, because in order to walk straight ahead I have to look backwards. But I'm making progress across the room. Actually, it's funny that this room has such a nautical feel to it.
It does.
You're sailing everywhere rather than walking. I've dropped the couch. Yeah, agree with that. So that, I think, is, for me, that's still a type of audio storytelling, but it works in a completely different way. Like its roots are journalistic, but it's still using kind of things that are captured accidentally. There's a lot of, in there, activation of the space, which I think is what happens in the Edgar Oliver piece as well, that you're really, it's using the absence of anything kind of in the visual realm to make you quite, to make your sensation of listening to it quite embodied, because it refers so often to, to things that you're feeling through your fingers and toes rather than things that you're seeing. So even though it's a program or a piece about a visual technology, it's quite interesting that it has, to me, it feels very non-visual. It feels very kind of embodied. But so I think between those, those are two pieces that I find interesting in one way or another. And between them, I think there are interesting ways of telling a story that brings in real life, that uses sonic cues when they're necessary, and can move quite happily between things that really happened and things that are set up formal and informal, and blends those things together to hopefully make a kind of an experience that's a bit more involving. So I think the core of the worky bit of what I wanted to talk about was about sound choices. And I think that those two pieces have a whole bunch of different sound choices, and maybe there's just a few things I could say about how I think about making sound choices, which might give you somewhere to start when you go collecting things. So I suppose notable is that both of those pieces, speech is a very big and important part of it. And one of the most important things that of interest to me in audio is the priority of speech over image. Now, both of those things use images quite a lot, but the actual discourse is right up the front. And so the core of anything that I've ever tried to do is like what comes out of somebody's mouth, is kind of work with that and see what can be done with that. Now, then the material quality of that is like, where are you going to record that voice? If the voice is going to say something, is it going to be in a room like this? Or is it going to be in a studio? Or is it going to be in an environment with many other sorts of background noises? And then the question then is what role do the background noises play in the sound of the voice? Are they there when you recorded it, and it is it has a sense of actuality, or is it something that you're going to be able to add on later, or you want to add on later to modify the mood and the feeling of the main voice? So you have the speech, and then you have the environment, and they are not always separated at all, but sometimes it's interesting to separate them. Sometimes it's good to record a voice in a room that has no resonance, and this is what people talk about when they record in the studio, that they record in such a way that it is a completely dry voice. You could then process that to be in any environment you want to. Kind of, I guess you're all sort of aware of that phenomenon. But sometimes you'd like the voice to come with the room. You'd like it to have the little reflections and resonance that come from being in a particular room, because that's going to do so much emotionally for the storytelling. So you could process it, but you'd be better off capturing it. But then when you want to do that, you have to deal with what does the environment sound like. So if we're recording in this room, if we're just listening in this room, we're not terribly conscious of that projector, I think. We're able to tune it out quite effectively. When you start recording, things like the sound of the projector, computer, laptops, all these things become much more foregrounded in your attention. It's what happens when you commit something, when you record a piece of audio. So you start thinking in a way that's positive, because maybe if I wanted to, if I'm trying to tell a story about a room, about a lecture room, and what happened within it, well then this could be the perfect environment for recording that. But in any other circumstances, you'd be trying to rid yourself of the noises. So could I get that switched off if I wanted to record in here? Because this isn't a bad room, it's quite soft. Bit of carpet on the floor is very good for recording voices. You don't want a room that's completely without soft furnishings where things ping around and it sounds a bit uncontrollable. If we were in this room and that sound was off and you were quite close to me with the microphone, it would be quite studio-like. You wouldn't get a lot of the room characteristic unless you wanted it. The third element, so there's speech and then the environment. And then the third element would be music, and is it diegetic music, like is it something that's completely involved in where the voice is talking, or is it something that you're going to again use, like you might use the environment to modulate the mood of the main thing, if the main thing is speech, and to emphasize it and also to clarify it on some occasions. So those in the LARP mixing desk, I kind of think that there are those kind of speech, environment, and music are kind of the mixing desk for what you might use to create a audio story. I suppose when I say music, that could also be the doorbell. It could also be a dog barking. Those are things that won't necessarily arrive all in You know, that won't be a 5 minutes of audio where there happens to be a dog barking when you want it. That might be something you just insert when you want it. So when you have all of those things together, I think the notion that's very important for me is just the idea of the figure and ground relationship, which is really kind of basic to, can I hear and enjoy the audio that I am listening to? If there is a foreground and a background, what's the relationship between the two of them? If the background is quite high in comparison to the speech, it might make the speech at worst unintelligible, but it may have a positive effect that not every word is completely clear. So what we'll be doing in Reaper is looking at how you might balance foreground and background, and which is what mixing is about in the end. When you've gone out there and assembled some pieces that you'd like to tell your story with, what will be the relationship of one to the other, both in time, which is the timeline that we're all familiar with, but also in the sense of the mix and the foreground and the background. Sometimes, for instance, in a pub, you might have a lot of conversational background, but you want to zoom in on one table. But it's quite interesting sometimes if the foreground and the background change positions. You know, that's a kind of one strategy for changing the moment from one piece of speech to the next. So that you assign something as a background, but you're always kind of with a sense that the background may change its position. Suddenly, in conjunction with something else, the background may need to be elevated. What else do I want to say about that? So, crowds, rooms, and music. The thing then is, where is the microphone? Which is, where is your iPhone? Or where is your Android device? Or where is your laptop with a microphone plugged in? Which is, I think, where's your iPad? There's the range of things that we might be recording on. So, if you want to record somebody and put them up to the foreground, then you want to get into their physical space as much as possible. It's very obvious. Now, if I'm talking to Adrian and recording Adrian from here, that will semantically mean very much that I'm in conversation with him and he is the center of my attention. Now, you might all be talking away in the background, and that'll still be, you know, part of our conversation. But I've promoted him, and this is very simple. If I were to move over to you with holding the device, I would promote you. But that's all what could happen in the moment. What you might be interested in doing then is seeing, can you make those moments happen that didn't happen in real life? I suppose for me, I think of things that happen in real life are the ketchup. You know, they're just good with everything. Something that really happened, you know, which is something that I can't plan for. Somebody made an off-the-cuff remark which was just good. Or even something fell over and people laughed. And that just pieces of real life just always sing out of any mix. But then maybe you can deploy them interestingly in conjunction with recording a voice that's quite isolated. And then I think in the Oculus Rift piece, it moves back and forward between quite formal interview situations, and then you're talking about holding the device, you know, 4 or 5 inches from somebody's mouth, slightly off to the side, because you don't want the plosives, the P's and so forth to pop against the mic. The iPhone does that remarkably well. This is what I was stunned to find. You know, the quality is actually very good. If I'm back here and you're all talking, I actually do, even though it's mono, I do get a sense of a sound field. So, you know, both of those qualities are quite useful. Where we have we, what I was thinking, would I go around and see each person recording and see if they were just able to press record and just see that everybody was working. What I want to do is to leave you over the next few hours after everybody else's lectures to actually put together a little story. But I want to also make sure that you're all able to record something with your devices. So maybe I'll tell you what the story you might like to tell is. I think it should be about a minute long. It's usual enough to work in pairs. I don't think that's too unusual. Like, as long as you both take turns holding the microphone. The only thing you have to agree on is what you might like to record. and this is what you might like to record, and you might disagree on it. I thought if you could try to tell your favorite joke in a minute, but just using audio. Now, you know, you can use voices to tell the joke, but maybe there's some interesting way to interpret a joke that you love, to give it a sense of what is it that significantly happens that is a sound. Why is this joke better told in this particular fashion? I was imagining my favorite joke, which is a horse walks into a bar and the barman says, "Why the long face?" You know, I think it could be done in a minute. But so there, you know, why not introduce a horse? But why introduce a horse? You should have a person whinnying, and then just maybe you could leave the gap that you hear the clip clop of the horse entering the bar, you hear whinnying, and you hear the punchline, and then it activates the joke. So I guess if you had a joke that you liked, you might be able to pull it apart as an audio experience in that kind of way, but keep it brief. So no, obviously you don't want any hairy dog stories or long, elaborate premises. You need more Groucho Marx kind of thing, you know, something with punch.